Okay, for people joining this live stream, we are talking about language completeness and consistency. We have a variety of items to discuss today, some of which are relevant for the now largely closed version 12. Okay, starting with URL and file functions.
Right. So there's this. Maybe it would be easier if you open the file name join ref page to understand this first one. There's this weird note that nobody really knew what it meant. And let's see. Right. So the last note. File name join of name canonicalizes the file name, making path name separators appropriate for your operating system. So what that means is exactly this one behavior here. So if you give it file name, if you give it a path with / separator, and your target is Windows, it'll change them to backslashes, which is kind of a bizarre thing for file name join to do, I think.
Well, does something else do it?
Well, you could do, file name split and file name join if you needed.
No, but that doesn't necessarily give you a correct
file name expand. Remember, Stephen, we stumbled on this when we looked at the file scheme, and you wondered about this as well. I think that predates the existence of file name expand, which does.
I'm sure it does.
And so I think we feel we should delete that note and at some point get rid of that functionality.
Well, I don't think we should ever get rid of it, but what is file name expand?
Oh, it's expand file name.
Oh, sorry, yes.
It's the third there.
How do we end up with file name join and expand file name?
Because its friend is absolute file name. So there's absolute file name, which is, verifies that the file exists, and expand file name, which, gives you the path that absolute file name will test if it were to go looking for it.
Also, doesn't the absolute file name do things like realize that the path is referring to a soft link or has a soft link in the middle, and it will turn it into, and it will resolve that and tell you what it actually is?
Sounds right. We should check that it does that. But okay, so expand file name. So one of the things that this is doing is making a file name suitable for a foreign operating system. This does not have that capability, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't really work that way. I mean,
what do you mean?
What you can do if you want to make it suitable for an operating system is to use that first. What's the inverse of file name join?
File name split.
File name split. So first you do a file name split, and then you do a file name join with a list argument and the operating system option. That's the only reliable way to do it.
Wait a minute. So file name.
Right.
You're saying.
So
why does the file name join with one argument do that? I mean, it seems not particularly profound, but
it doesn't do that. So, for example, if you were on Windows and you had a separator with backslashes, and you said file name join of, A/B, and you gave it an operating system goes to, Unix, it would do nothing. So what this behavior is really, what this behavior actually is it takes file names which use slashes and converts them to the target operating system, which back when we had 3 standards, because classic Mac OS used colons and Windows uses backslashes, was perhaps...
Does Windows still use backslashes?
Yes.
Does it accept forward slashes? I thought it did.
Sort of. It depends exactly how you...
But do our file operations accept forward slashes? They do, don't they?
I think so.
Well, I mean, if you look at this first example on the left, file name join, I mean, there are really 2 operating systems there. You need to know what the intended operating system is of the first file name argument, and then you have the option, and I don't know whether the option refers to the original or to the intended.
No, to the target.
And so that's why I say that file name split followed by file name join, and each having its operating system option is what you need to do.
Listen, look, the thing we really need to figure out is for Windows, which is the only remaining operating system that doesn't have the standard Unix / convention, right? Yep. How forgiving are our file name operations with respect to giving Unix file names for Windows? If we somehow manage to make that work, and sadly, my Windows, I used to use a Windows machine part of the time, but for the last 2 years, that's basically been impossible to set it up correctly, so I haven't been using it. Which is really a shame. So I don't know whether, I mean, I just think we should make sure that our Unix style file name conventions work properly on Windows. And this issue is sort of moot, except for interacting with external programs. And in interacting with external programs, the weird hack of having file name join of one argument convert file names seems a bit unnecessary. So I agree that it should be undocumented, but more important is to make sure that we do sensible things on Windows with Unix-style file names. Is that fair? So let's go find that out.
Okay, here I'm firing up a Windows VM so I can do at least a quick test.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's move on.
Okay. So then the second point is right. So one of the things with this newly expanded capabilities of file name foo functions to take file URLs is that so that solves the problem of taking a file URL and turning it into a path that you can, give your shell or give, low-level file.
Okay, so yet another hacker, Lola.
Yes, but Itai, the only reason I added this is that we have that file name split support, which we are now removing, and so I will remove that code before it even makes it into 12.0, because there's no point in adding code that is already obsolete. So if we agree to undocument the single string case for file name join, then I will remove that code to handle file name join of a single URL file URL.
Right, but right, you still have code. I'm not talking just about file name split. Right, I mean, you did the expand file name takes a file URL and converts it to an equivalent. And there's maybe some sort of fake support in file name join, which needs to be done better. That's point 3. But before we go on to that, so expand file name solves the problem of, okay, I have this weird file URL. How do I convert it into a file name that I can give to low-level file functions? But what solves the reverse problem? I have a file name, and I want to construct a file URL for, I don't know why. Maybe, maybe.
Yes. I mean, that's probably the question. Why would you want to do this? I mean, you would have to just go use the standard URL parse and URL build functionality.
So can you?
I mean, if you have a file name,
do you have an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a parse name, you first do a file name split, and then you set then you use that result as the path component in a URL build. I mean, it's a lot of work. I mean, if we want to convert path names to file URLs, then we would need such a function just for convenience.
Right. I mean, right. So, my sense of the history is the reason we started even supporting converting file URLs to file names is because, you used file URLs in your local object thingamabob.
Yes.
Right. So suppose somebody, takes takes a local object file URL and converts it to a file, and then maybe wants to go back to a file URL.
Yeah, I mean, you could always say local object of path, and it will do it for you because it doesn't check the existence of anything. So probably that function is local object. A slight misuse, but it will certainly return a file URL.
Okay.
What are you proposing? The local object of URL?
Yeah, if you have a path name, a string path name, and you want the file URL, so you say local object of that.
Right. So he's suggesting if you were to type in right now, local object of Etsy FS tab / Etsy FS. Oh yeah, that will work.
Yes, so that works.
Okay. Oh well, it returns a local object.
Yes, and now you extract you replace the head local object by URL.
Right. And you apply URL to local object.
Yes.
It's a bit weird. Why doesn't URL of etc. password do the right thing?
Because URL is just information, right? That's just a tip, and
it's kind of amusing what it did here. Will it actually work to open its Etsy password?
It might. Depends on how the operating system treats that. Okay, did it beep?
Probably need a proper one, file : //
It didn't do anything here. It didn't beep. It didn't do anything.
No.
So
it might not have a default application to open it with.
Oh, right, because it doesn't know. Right, you'd need something with like an extension, with like a TXT extension.
It exists that. What is that?
But try it with the file : / prefix. Maybe that then has a proper MIME type.
Right. I think basically the operating system doesn't know what to do with this file type. So you need something with like a TXT extension.
All right. Okay. Where do I put? Oh, yeah, here.
There, yes.
Technically, you need one more, right? You need two slashes for the at the beginning.
Oh,
right?
I see.
Two slashes for the protocol and one slash for. Yeah, it's the operating system doesn't know what to do with this file.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
I mean, your
by
browser.
The way, on this open thing, we should do better than that.
I mean, I'm actually surprised it doesn't open your browser because the browser knows what to do with file URLs.
Okay, so this is a bug in the way that System Open is interacting with URL.
Well, so I don't know that I would go that far. I mean, the purpose of System Open is to give this URL to the operating system, and it will do whatever it does with it. So if you gave it something that it knew what to do with, like a .txt file, it would open it in your text editor. But it doesn't have a file association for .hd. And it's not a HTTP, so it's not giving it to the browser.
Okay. Well, okay. So I don't know what this seems wrong that this doesn't do anything, that it offers you an open thing, but that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I thought it would give you a beep if because it shouldn't. I mean, system open should know whether the operating system was happy with it or not. But I mean, we'd need to talk to Lou and John about
also. Sometimes system open, if it doesn't work, I mean, the normal way is to prompt you for the program to use, right?
Not on Mac.
No, okay. So, but on Windows and Linux, it would do that. Yes.
So.
I mean, we are really at the mercy of the operating system here.
Yeah. Right. So I guess my question is: are we okay with needing to use URL at local object, or maybe what were you suggesting, Roman, that you could use URL parse or something?
Yeah, URL parse, but that's that's even less obvious.
Okay.
Okay, that's interesting. Why would it do that? So look, whatever system open is doing, and by the way, for some reason, Mike, what's another harmless file that would exist here?
Let's see if I can find one.
Oh, whatever. I don't think there's anything profound in this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it opened.
I mean, Mac probably has its own way of telling what the file is supposed to be.
Okay, so the question is, why did it work there?
Because it figured out that it was a text file. Oh, here.
Yeah, why did it not work in this case?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question, which I do not know the answer to. So if you do file of /etc password.
Oh no, that worked.
No,
that worked.
Okay.
Okay, that worked. I think I didn't try that one before. So there's something about the FS tab file that it maybe is protected in some way.
Or binary or whatever.
Right, or maybe because it actually has an extension, it's looking for a file association, whereas password has no extension, so it's just defaulting to text.
Right. Okay. Anyway, all right. What do we do? Let's see. Yeah. So this should be doing the equivalent of system open, but when it fails, when this happens, surely pressing that button should generate a message rather than just silently doing nothing.
Right. Like I said, I was pretty sure it's supposed to beep at you.
Okay, well,
I would expect a beep and not a message that pops up wherever.
Yeah. All right. Well,
okay,
yeah,
so there's a bug there. So we should
send this to Lou to investigate.
Okay, let's move on, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can we go on to this input file name question?
Well, we did skip over the.
What did we skip over?
The number 3 there, support for URL and file name join, which is.
What about it? So what are we doing there? What do we want to do there?
Well, right now I think it only does basically what expand file name does. But if we're going to support
what does it do? What do you want it to do? Is there a problem?
Okay, so if you open the email thread and read my comments, then the idea is that the normal argument of file name join is a list, and the first argument of that list should allow for a file scheme URL. It does allow for cloud object.
Fine.
So I will simply add that case and
the right
remove
thing.
the other case. And if you have it, if you still have it open, that file name join, you might just as well delete that note right now. So we are done with that.
I can take care of that.
Okay. So, and I will delete the code to handle a lonely file URL, not inside the list.
Okay.
Good.
All right. So then $input file name plus Wolfram script. Yeah. So you just need to open the source. Yeah. So, oh, you didn't update today because I added this, unless I just imagined committing it, but Let me see. Okay.
Hold on. I
Oh, for
didn't.
heaven's sake! I only imagined committing it.
Okay, well, why don't you commit it?
Do you want me to commit now, or do you want me to share?
No, why don't you commit, and I'll
Okay.
pull it in. Give me a moment here, actually, for something else. All right. What was that file? Input file name.
I was muted. Okay, right. So previously, there was this issue with depending on in what mode you invoked the script. In some modes it would use get, in other modes it would not use get. So in the modes where it used get, it would set $input file name, and in the other modes it would not. This is something that Garrett has now fixed in version 12, so that no matter how you invoke Wolfram script,
Okay. So the execution of a Wolfram language script through Wolfram script.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
What does it do in the case where, let's see, what does it do in the case? Okay, I see. If you're just running Wolfram script from the command line, so for example, if I just say, here, Wolfram script,
right, so that's interactive input. So per the documentation, it should return a null string.
Okay. Okay, fine. So if it's a hash bang, what happens if I do this? Wolfram script.
You better quit
code.
Mathematica first.
Oh yeah, very good. Weird. Okay, Control D, is that right?
Yep.
Yes. Always been Control D. The hell's that? Oh, it's in the shell.
It's the shell. You need to escape the $.
With just a backslash?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Right, but if you had a file either foo.wl or foo.wls, and you did Wolfram script -file that name, you would get $input file name.
Why are we saying at the start of the execution? Isn't it during the execution of a Wolfram language? I mean, what happens if that script calls another script and then returns?
Right. So if that script gets another file, then during that get, $input file name will be that second
but then
file.
it reverts.
But then it will revert.
Okay, so this isn't quite right. So it says during the execution of a Wolfram language script, set to the absolute file name in which the script is stored. Is that right?
I think that's right.
During interactive input or other forms of input that do not involve a file name, that do not involve, okay, well, actually, when input is not taken from a file,
correct,
does not come from a file,
I mean, the one case where it's where that's potentially slightly ambiguous is right in the notebook, even if it's saved. $input.
Right. Okay. Well, it does not come from an explicit. It's not come directly from a file. This is also, or comes from an interactive notebook.
Yes, this is correct. Because if you pipe in input or if you have an interactive session, it'll be empty.
Okay. Is this OR's WLS file?
It can be well if it's it can be a WLS file, but it doesn't have to be. Yeah.
Of a script file through Wolfram script. Absolute file name of the script file. Okay.
Yep, and add the 12 to the modified in at the top, and we'll be done.
Okay. All right, let's continue. Recursive option for copy directory. Yeah, I mean, so what's that?
Yeah, again, there's something missing from here, but never mind. It's trivial. Just go on.
Okay, so first question. Yeah, I mean, why isn't there a way to copy a whole directory tree?
Well, there is. It's called copy directory.
No, but does it copy the subdirectories?
Yes. In fact, it's a yes. So yeah, I don't know what happened to the added notes I put for this guy, but in fact, the situation is copy. This basically that copy file and copy directory are the same function. So if you did copy file on a directory, then without any warning, it would copy the whole directory tree.
And what about if I say copy file and then the destination is a directory?
Then, well, are you saying the source? It will copy the whole tree into that. I believe it'll copy the whole.
No. I'm saying the source is a file, the destination is a directory.
Right, then it'll copy that one file into that directory.
Okay, I don't think this is properly documented. That's what I would expect it would do from typical operating system copy file, but it's not what's documented. Okay, so that needs to be looked at. I mean, if it says here, right, there's nothing here that says that it copies into the directory. Okay. So,
right.
Can we please fix that?
Okay, but I think we have sort of a more serious issue again, that both copy file and copy directory sort of silently treat files and directories interchangeably.
Right. So okay, so that's fine, but let's just document it. Whatever it has been doing, if it is the same as what operating systems typically do, is okay.
Well, it's not. I don't think that is what operating systems typically do.
I just tested it, and if you do a copy file and file 2 is a directory, it just treats it as an existing file and refuses to copy. So it doesn't treat it.
I think that's wrong, because I think you need the functionality to take a file and copy it into a directory.
That would be very useful, yes.
Yes.
So it should say somehow that if the file 2 is an existing directory, it will copy into that.
Yes, that is what it should say.
And that probably also makes sense for cloud objects and local objects, because they can be directories too.
Yeah,
Yes.
so.
Well, can it tell if the destination of a cloud object?
File type. If the file type is directory, then it's a directory. Otherwise, if it's a file, then it complains about not overwriting. If it's none, then it just does it. And of course, I mean, we could go on and have another option that says whether it should create intermediate missing directories or not, but don't know where we want to stop.
Right, but okay, so the first thing is somebody needs to, so Roman and Itai, maybe you could look at this and try and come up with the, details for how this should work.
Okay.
Sounds straightforward to me. Okay, let's keep going here.
Okay. Right, so I thought, we can certainly talk about the next item. I thought our node was going to be here, but I think there are enough people that we can talk about this even without our node.
Okay.
So if you open up right, so this is about this compiled code function. So there was a thread about this recently where I was confused, and then our node by why I was getting why compiled function was giving me something that was clearly not matching its declared type, and then our node chimed in and said yes, that he's also confused by this. So I think
okay. Well, actually, before we get to that, Ethan on our live stream is asking a couple of interesting questions.
Okay.
First question is, will Wolfram script ever support remote kernels? There's no good reason it shouldn't. Hasn't been looked at. I mean, Roman, can you comment on that? I mean, if the kernel connection manager was here, we would be able to do that, wouldn't we?
Yes, I mean, we could certainly set up a connection through SSH or so. I mean, we have the functionality. And then there's also the other case where the kernel is in the cloud, and I think that is supported.
Right. So
that's already supported, right?
Yeah. So we support cloud kernels. So basically, right. I mean, I don't know that this was anywhere on our roadmap, but right, basically we would need, if by remote kernels he means, some kernel that we would access via SSH.
Whatever the remote kernel capability is from a front end, you could expect to access kernels in the same kind of way. It's useful. I mean, it would allow. I mean, I have no idea what happens in Wolfram script if you say parallel. You could be using the parallel evaluate kernel provisioning stuff, but I have no idea what that will do.
Well, I mean, that's different, right? Because there, it's the local kernel that you're using that's going to be launching those subkernels, however it decides to do that.
Yeah.
Which is different from you have no local kernel and you need to SSH into some remote machine to have a kernel to even start doing anything. Which, I mean, is certainly...
we can probably ask Garrett. I mean, he should know whether that is even feasible or not.
Right. Okay. So let's do that.
Okay.
Okay. Having copy file work between remote and local directories with authentication, et cetera, would be great. I thought we did have copy file
that
able to...
will be in 12.0 with SCP and SFTP support.
Okay. Copy directory should have options for pattern exclusions, like Linux CP.
That's a reasonable suggestion.
Actually, he's suggesting beyond that, would be better to mimic the AWS command line interface, which I do not know.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it in detail either.
I mean, there are several tools for copying trees, like rsync is another popular one, which has all these exclusion options. And so I don't know which one we should emulate.
Well, I mean, I don't think that we necessarily Yeah, I mean, rsync has about 40 or 50 options, right? I mean, I don't think we want to go the rsync route, at least not literally. But I think, I don't think we necessarily need to have a bug for bug, re-implementation of one of these standard tools, as long as we provide something that integrates nicely with the language. So, right, you can specify exclusions as a regular expression or a string pattern or whatever. It would, yeah. I guess Roman and I can look at this since we're already looking at this, we can add this to our list of things to think about: copy file and copy directory.
Okay.
Okay. And look at this AWS thing, whatever it is. Okay, what is this here?
Right. So this was. So I created a very simple compiled function that just rounds its argument, and it claims to return a integer 64. But when you give it the $max machine number, it sort of silently returns a big, a big integer rather than something that's a machine integer. And so I was very surprised by this. And Tom said, "Oh, there's this message, but Stephen wanted it off by default." And then our node came in sort of later in the thread and said, yeah, I think this I also think this should be on by default. So, me and our node agreeing, it's not exactly like me and Tolly agreeing, but it's certainly closer to that end of the scale than, me and John agreeing. So, so
the issue is how much noise there is associated with using the compiler. I mean, I tend to think that in this experimental phase of using the compiler, that it's probably worth having it on by default. But I don't think that's the long-term story. I mean, right now it's because there's so many ways to fail with using the compiler that it makes more sense to have it on by default. But what is this? Even I don't even understand. I don't even understand even approximately what the heck it's doing here.
Right.
I mean, so what is it supposed to do? This is supposed to just generate why it takes so long. I have no idea. What the heck is that?
There is some sort of problem in your build, because this works for me.
This is a 2 days ago build.
I wonder if if it needs to look at some XML, and this was the day that XML was broken due to Monday was due to a momentary misconfiguration on the build machines.
Okay.
But yes, right. So this is supposed to take, right. So I'm creating a function that takes a real 64 and rounds it to an integer.
Yeah, I know, and it's not doing correct type inference, so it's getting the wrong answer.
Well, no, I'm giving it an input that it can't possibly produce the output, right? So, right, because, I suppose you can argue...
I don't understand why it produces output in this case. I mean, this is a specific compiled function that has a specific type declaration. Your input does not match the type declaration. What is it
Yes,
doing?
It does.
Oh, it does.
Right, I gave it max machine number.
Oh, I see, but that's bigger than max integer.
Can't fit in the result, because you can't fit 2 to the 24th.
I understand. Well, then I kind of agree that for the time being, this message should be on. I mean, I'm hoping that in the future, the message will not be on anymore.
Okay.
Sorry, I need to go to an external meeting.
Okay. See you.
Right. So this is an email that came to me from I know not where.
By the way, a comment from Brian on our live stream: allowing exclusions based on file properties such as date and size would be useful in the copy. I agree. And we probably have some pattern for that in FileNameScan. I mean, whatever FileNameScan is doing to pick the files that it wants to consider is kind of perhaps a pattern for this.
Yep.
Okay, extensions to thread and map thread.
So, yeah, so I'm not sure exactly where this came from, but
I think it might have come from me.
Yeah, it came from you and Lee, Stephen.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So right now, map thread insists on lists. Right. So you can't even do G. You can't have a G of whatever in the second argument and have it take up the different, which is annoying every now and then.
Yes.
Right. Because you need to.
I don't see why map thread doesn't work on associations. I don't think that would harm anything. In other words, there's no ambiguity. Map thread will dig to a certain level, and it's not like it would do something useful. It's just going to fail in this case, right?
Right. Well, yes, right. But my point is that it's going to fail with any head other than list.
No, right? I understand that. But what does it do right now in this case? That's really weird what it seems to be doing. Why would it be doing that? Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, it just fails.
Right. So right. This is the suggested behavior. Right. And actually, now that I look at what they're saying, I'm not sure why map thread with an association should produce a list of results. I guess I didn't.
Well, let's take a look at what it should do. So map thread, normally if that was a list, right? If this was a list,
right, it needs to be a list of lists. So I think maybe if you get rid of the rule.
Okay. So what do we think the analog of that is here? The association should be, which list are we seeing here? We are seeing the outer list, presumably. Well, what do we think we're seeing? Do we think we're seeing the outer list? Do we think that thing there is the outer list? Yes, I would think what the result should be, yeah, K1.
No, but isn't map thread is just there for cases where thread of F of arc collapses before thread sees it. So I think what we are seeing is the inner list, because what you're really trying to do is F of list 1, 2, comma, list 3, 4. And if F intervenes before you do thread of that, then you use map thread.
Okay, so this would be the correct answer then, because that's using the inner list becomes the outer container here, right?
No, I don't think that's right. I mean, right, map thread takes the right, it gives you a list and it takes the, maybe it's, well, we don't know what head to use, so we're using list, but right, it gives you the list of results, F of A, right? It takes the corresponding elements from each sublist in the basic usage.
Yes, right.
Oh, and it says map thread works on association objects. What does
the third example down there?
What the heck? Well, why does it work on that one?
Inside the list, the outer element is a list, not an association.
Right.
Okay.
So, and I think which makes sense, because I mean you're really giving it a list of parallel arguments. So
okay. So the question is, if the outer thing is an association, what does it mean?
Right, and oh, and here the result is an association. Okay.
Which I think is probably correct, maybe.
I mean, on the right-hand side, we have a list of associations turning into an association of lists. No arguments.
Let's take a look. Let's take a look. In this case here. Okay, so now if we say, okay, so clearly if we say B goes to X, and let's say C goes to Z,
it should yell
that
at
will
us.
say it will fail, right?
Yep.
But this is the same issue as in join across and in other functions. To what extent do you create, missing entries in the association? Do you get what I'm saying? Like join across has a whole elaborate way of doing that.
What does merge do in this case? Or is this not the merge?
What does merge do for what? For that list of...
Right, so if you do that list, comma, F...
What did that just do? That merged... Okay, it merged... Yes, it merged everything that was relevant. So if I put in a C arrow W here, that will do that. Okay.
Right. So let's take a look at the matrix case. I wonder if that'll give us some insight into which list we're seeing in the output. So there's an example you can copy, the second basic example there. Okay, so level 2.
Well, if we did the same thing at level 1, we'll get a bunch of lists in there.
Yep.
Okay. So look, I mean, the issue here is, should an outer association, does merge support an outer association? Okay. Why doesn't merge support that? One would think it should be able to do that, because it would put, instead of F list 1, 2, it would put there F of association P1, Q2.
Right, I mean, conceivably it could work, although I think it would still have to return a list.
Why?
I mean, because there's sort of, the transpose operation built into this, right?
No, look at it. If the outermost thing is an association...
Right, but I'm saying the keys don't match up, because...
Why not? You're just taking the keys of the macro objects here.
Right, I mean, but suppose it gave a key, or you're saying the A would be it would return keys in terms of A, B, and C.
But no. What I'm saying the result will be is A arrow, F of association P arrow 1, Q arrow 2. See?
Oh, I see, I think. Right. I mean, so it could return an association, but it wouldn't involve P and Q.
Why not? What I'm saying is the result should be A arrow, F of association P arrow 1, Q arrow 2. Right? Comma, B arrow, F of association blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, okay, I see, but...
Right? That makes sense. I don't know why we're not doing that. Okay, so that's one case, is merge dealing with an outer association rather than outer list. And the other case, so the cases we're dealing with here are map thread and merge with an outer association. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see why those shouldn't be made to work. I think that behavior is fairly easy to, fairly obvious. Let us investigate that. Seems reasonable to me. Do we agree with these outputs here? Yeah, I think so. I think that list is that inner list there. So if we go down multiple levels, so for example, if I were to do this, map thread, and then this is an association, P arrow 1, Q arrow 2, right? Then I should get, then the outermost thing will be an association, right?
Well, but in this example, in the line before you modified it, it doesn't do the map part, right? F should map over those associations on the right-hand side.
You are right. That's not the right thing. Yeah.
So it should be K1 arrow F of 1, K2 arrow F of 3.
No, the analog. No, that's not right, because here, I see. There's a problem. There's a problem because the map thread is mapping onto the naked, it's applying to the list 1, 3. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you can't apply to an association. Get what I'm saying? So if I say
Yes.
F at,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
this association, I don't even know
That
what
doesn't work.
Oh, fascinating. Well, that's correct. Okay, but so that's what it would have to do.
Yeah, so it's probably not that useful. Huh?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's useful or not. But
a way of seeing map thread is as an outer and then an inner. So I wonder whether if we separate these steps.
okay, listen, I think this should be studied, but not right here. Ethan on our live stream is talking about a function called index by association comma A, which would give, but we don't see what it gives. That is fast operators to index and de-index tables. Why isn't that just position effectively? What is index by? Oh, index by. What does that mean? Does that, or isn't that some kind of key map thing? Anybody understand that? I don't know. Please give us more indication. Let's move on. So this should be studied, but we don't know where it's going to go yet. Oh my gosh, this is a big can of worms. This is the failure versus $failed versus.
Yeah, these are definitely open-ended post V12 discussions. So if you want to postpone them,
I think we should postpone that. But I think we should. I mean, for this particular one, we need the big inventory of where is $failed, etc. used, and the absurd, version 0.9, internal variable $$ luxury yacht, which was an early. Which was one of the
luxury yacht.
Yes, it was an early thing added as a hack to avoid various kinds of things. I doubt it's still extant in any way, but it was an earlier kind of hack for internal use of $failed.
Okay,
that's just a joke.
All right. Well, Stephen, before you run away, if you can let me share for a second, I want to.
Yeah, actually, I want to show what Ethan on our live stream is.
Oh, showing. Okay. Yes.
So that's the output from. I'm completely mystified here.
Isn't this like associate? Well, I guess I'd need to see what the input is, but this
is something where you're taking a list of associations and you're giving a value, an index value here. I'm a little confused. What's the input? Okay, well, we'll get that perhaps in a moment. All right, what's this? Listen, we have another issue with options. Okay. In the function repository, we don't have a good solution for how to deal with options. Because, other than creating a resource symbol type thing and having the options in resource functions be their own resource symbols, which seems very grotesque, we don't have a good way of
what?
Well, I mean, we don't have a good way of having. I mean, let me show you some horrors here.
Because I mean, I had some meeting with the resource function people like 3 months ago, and I even agreed to like a 10 a.m. meeting. And I told them if they need a way to dispatch off of resource function options of a resource function, that's pretty easy to do. I mean, it's a little bit.
But how do they represent? Where's a good example here? I'm trying to find one which had one of these. I found one immediately yesterday. Oh gosh, Sushma, is Sushma here? Do you remember what the horror that I found yesterday was?
From camel case?
Thank you. Okay, well, this was a complete horror there, where they're hijacking a system symbol to use it as an option. Okay. So the question is, what should be done here? So one possibility is to use string options, which I don't like at all.
Mm-hmm.
Another possibility is to introduce a resource symbol, but that's also kind of grotesque.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the options for what to do here?
As in the name of the option.
Well, as in the option.
Concept of resource function option associated to this name.
Well, I mean, why can't it just be Joe random symbol?
What context would it be in?
Doesn't matter.
What do you mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, if they write their code correctly using option value and such, that it doesn't care about the context. It only cares about the name.
Okay, I don't think they know that. I didn't know that actually, although I'm sure I designed that years ago. Okay, so in other words, they could just have random symbol names there. It's a little weird because they will show up in a user's, global context probably.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, the problem is that options are not scoped the same way as the rest. So, I mean, one possibility is if the context doesn't matter. I mean, we could introduce a new context just for options. And then we could just throw everything in there and it would be on a search path.
Well, but I don't understand that. I mean, because how do we know, one of the functions in the function repository could have a second argument that's a rule. How do we know it's an option on the left-hand side?
Well, it has to declare the options, right?
So I was going to say, do options for function repository objects get attached in some way?
I think they currently have some up value on options to make that work, even though, as I said, I had some early morning meeting with them and told them, yeah, we can actually do this properly very easily.
Wait a minute. So you're saying, so if I take this function here,
mm-hmm.
and I say options of that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. How the heck does that work?
Well, they have an up value on options of resource function, which...
Okay, fine. Okay, the issue here is... Okay, I mean, the first bug here, of course, Sushma, is that there's no documentation that mentions anything about the options, but let's not worry about that. But the real question is, how should they set up these options? So you're suggesting that they just use kind of unidentified flying symbols, basically.
That's my initial instinct, unless there's some problem with that.
I mean, personally, I would use strings.
Yeah, but we've tried to avoid using strings for options elsewhere in the system because they're not documentable.
Right. I mean, but from camel case in the resource function, there is a string.
Yes.
You know, I mean, these aren't system functions. These are something else.
But it's a little weird because there'll be strings. Some options will be grandfathered from the main system context, and they will be symbols. And some will happen to be, you know, local to these functions, and they will be strings. And that's pretty ugly.
Right. Well, so right now, the code in like option value, maybe even option queue,
options pattern,
assumes that the left-hand side of a valid option is either a string or a symbol.
Okay. Why didn't that work? That's even a bug in the Camela. But anyway. Okay. All right. So now the question would be, if I put two lowercase arrow true,
right. I mean, if you use the general options framework, it doesn't matter if it's a string, a symbol, what context the symbol is in.
Okay, so they're using that, presumably. Well, I don't know whether the code, we'd have to look at the source code here for this to see what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah. So they've got options pattern, options value. You could
they should
the foo backtick to lowercase and...
Yeah, and it should also work.
I mean, there should be a way to declare an option here in this source without having to decide where it goes, because that's something we can decide.
What are you saying?
No, I mean, there should be a way to declare an option for that function without having to decide whether you want to use a system symbol, a string or so. You just declare an option name to lowercase and leave it to us to implement it, either by turning it into a symbol in some context or treating it internally as a string.
Well, I mean, Roman, it looks like it is. I mean, that at the bottom of that definition is options of from camel case.
Which still
the right-hand side is a system symbol here. And the right-hand side should probably be a string.
Well, no. I'm saying we should be able to process, if we decide we want to do something, we're already turning that from camel case symbol into...
Well, here's the question. If I did this, right?
Yes, I would. I mean, we should promote this, and we can still turn this into a symbol, but if it...
Well, but what happens
the source
here?
As a symbol, then...
What happens here? Option value, should that all be a string?
No, you can mix and match.
All right, so then if I say from camel case here...
Yeah, but yes, I mean, if you use a symbol in the source of that function, then you create that symbol.
Yes.
But if you use a string, then you are not committed.
I understand. So that worked. Now, what happens if I stringify it?
It's even documented if you look at the option value.
Okay, hold on. What happens if I do this? That's really, really weird. I don't even know what that's doing now.
Well, I mean, map-add, of course, isn't going to work.
Oh, two lowercase. Oh, God. That's a different use of two lowercase.
Yes.
That's completely crazy. Wow. Okay. Well, so this is really just a convention for how people write these things.
Right. I mean, and the thing is that if you put it in, some context, then you're going to see that context when you do options of the resource function, unless that context is on path.
Sorry, say that again. What?
Right. So if we said, that we defined the options of frame from camel case as, resource option backtick lowercase q or something. That probably exists also. Goes to true or false.
Okay.
Then when you do options of your resource function, like you did at, what is that, 29, line 29, you're going to see that context unless that context is also on $context path for some reason.
Well, you're arguing against...
I'm arguing against putting options in arbitrary contexts, because I think that's going to look worse than just using strings.
Right, but okay, the question really is, how do we document in the function repository, how do we document options? Because unlike in our main documentation, where options are symbols and they have their own reference pages, we don't want to be that heavyweight for the function repository.
Right, but I thought the whole point of function repository functions was that they all fit on one page. So what does it matter if they're strings or not? You have a table or symbols.
What do you mean
or
they all
whatever.
fit in one page? What are we talking about there?
That the document, right? These are supposed to be simple one-liner.
Well, they're not necessarily, implemented as one line, but their documentation is cut and dried. Doesn't have a lot of tentacles.
Right. So you have a table of, you have an option section with examples, or you have a table of string options, and that's it. I mean.
Okay, but the question is, are they string options or are they symbol options that are documented there?
I would have the code that generates the resource object force everything into strings, even if they are already system symbols.
That's really funky.
One question, do we want users to use the same option for the same objective, or they can use the same option for different things?
No, it should, obviously they should try, and just like you could use the word turtle to represent something that isn't a turtle, but it will be a foolish thing to do. I mean, that was a silly example, but you know what I'm saying. You can, I'm immediately thinking of a million examples where people use a word, like I'm thinking of the word chair. What other meaning could that possibly have except some kind of fancy professorship?
So the question is whether we need a list of all the options so that users make sure that they are not reusing an option in a different way then. Because if we use the strings...
So in other words, yeah, I see what you're saying. If we use string options, then they could be reusing what is in other places a symbol option, but using it for a different purpose.
Exactly. And then each option is documented in each page in its own way. And we don't have to care.
Well, I'm sorry, what if they're using an already documented option, then obviously it has its own documentation.
So two users may define options with the same name, but they have different purposes in mind.
Oh, I see.
And it will be fine if those are documented.
Like degree or something.
What?
I mean, so suppose you had, functions, as an option. You use the name, the string degree. So in one place it's an interpolation order sort of thing, and somewhere else it's temperature thing or something.
Yeah, okay. So the main point you're making is because we don't have global design, for the function repository, there is no global design oversight. Therefore, that can happen. We could have, a whole giant colony of uses of an option for one thing, which eventually will collide with uses for another thing. And, each function has its own options because this is one function at a time type work.
Exactly. We worry about not having the same name for the function, but the options we don't care.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer. But then the question is, what do we tell people to do and how do we document it? So we could tell them if you are using, okay, so, one possibility is that we say, document it as if they're symbols so that if you happen to have an option which agrees with an existing system option, first, you'll notice that. And second of all, the documentation will link to it. Okay. And we've already done this ourselves. We have a tiny number of options that don't have their own documentation pages, but nevertheless, they're system symbols. But so in this case, what we would say is implement as strings, document as symbols. Does that make sense?
When you say document as symbols, you mean having their separate pages?
No, I don't mean have a separate page. I just mean on the page for the function, have the table not have quotes in it.
Okay, yes. Yeah, that I agree.
Okay.
Yes. I think the only slight problem is if I then use that function and I use the option without the quotes.
It'll work.
It will work, and that symbol will end up in global or so.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, I think that's fine, yes, because it doesn't, I think that's fine, yes.
All right,
I think that
good.
works.
Good, then Sushma, can you communicate that to the function repository folk?
Yep. Yeah.
I think that's very good progress, actually. And it can be part of the validation step to check that people have defined their options, which are not system symbols, as strings.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually like this solution. I mean, it's a bit of a hack, but there's no choice but to have a bit of a hack because this is a, that's the nature.
It's an ad hoc thing, so.
Right. Okay, interesting comment from Brian on the live stream that from camel cases to lowercase should make all the words lowercase, and other options such as title case could make the first letter of the first word capitalized. I agree.
Right. I mean, really, it should be a conversion function option.
Okay, see, this is the slippery slope on which we live with the function repository.
I'm saying if we were designing it, it would be.
Yes, I understand. And okay, but what Brian's comment effectively raises for us, and there's more discussion with Sushma here, is, what is our mechanism for users to give design commentary on these things? And do we have a good way of doing that discussion? Because, it could be, we've got a fair number of these functions. It could be somebody looks at this, particularly people who've, been involved in these live streams, certainly know what our process is. And, if people could give useful comments on these functions, given that we're not doing this whole process for all these functions, that's the whole point. What's our mechanism for, providing that, having design discussion about these functions and feeding it back to the authors? Have we thought about this?
No, we've not thought about it. There is a give feedback in the page, but we don't have like interactive sessions with.
Oh, this is stupid. Please, we need to fix this. This is really stupid, if I might say so. So much of this, what on earth would a phone number be good for here? No. We went through this, didn't we, a few weeks ago? So, Shema?
I'll check. That's something Bob deals with, not I. So I will ping him about it.
Right, but I think I went through what this should say.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be this.
Yeah, I remember reading that email from you.
Could we link it to the community?
Yes, I think that would be a fine thing to do. And have... Yeah, okay, so that's a question for Vitali. If one says, discuss this function on community, how should that work?
could create an appropriate topic. And,
a topic and then a thread. And then the first time somebody does that, okay, so that's a reasonable way to do it. So what would happen is discuss this on community. If it already exists, if there's already a thread tagged to this function, then it would just, you just be taken there. If there isn't a thread, it would create a new one. Right, so I think that's a good idea. That's the right place to put it. Yeah, fair enough. So then every function, we shouldn't probably preemptively create a thread on community for every single function repository item, but there should be a way, if there is such a thread, to immediately jump to it from this page. And that would also be useful to people who are trying to use this function, because there might be comments about it on that thread. I like that idea. Sandra is pointing out that MathWorks has a function repository. Yeah, I'm sure they copied it from our thing called MathSource from 1989, which we didn't ever think was very successful. And they have a discussion thread. Yeah, I'm sure. The I think okay, actually, Ethan is asking the question, why is the resource function icon an open circle? Yes, that question has been raised by other people, and I thought we were getting a design that involved it not being an open circle, because I think the open circle is a little confusing. Wasn't that, Sushma, wasn't that something that was ongoing?
Jeremy sent some design specs for that. We have to look back on that again.
We didn't, did we conclude on something or not?
No, we did not conclude on anything. That can happen in our next meeting.
Right. The function repository, interestingly, MathSource is a lesson, was not a function repository. It's just a random, put in any random blob of code you want, and that wasn't very successful. Now, hopefully, we are also about to have a public Packlet repository, which again is more of a, you can install anything type thing. But I personally think the function repository is going to be easier for most people than the Packlet system, which will only be for people who are doing pretty professional software development, is my view. And also the Packlet system will allow, elaborate updating and forking and so on things, whereas the function repository is pretty much, well, there's a version and then you can update it to a new version and so on. And you'll be getting the newest version whenever you use it. All right, let's
if we're ready to wrap up, can I share my screen briefly?
No, because we're going to talk about Ethan's comments about his. Okay, the input is this association. Let's go back here. Okay, so he's saying. That is an interesting operation. I mean, we could imagine that also for a list, that you take out the nth element here, and that becomes that's an interesting operation, I think. I mean, people understand what this is. Well, the one thing it can immediately become is a function repository entry. And if Ethan has already implemented this, then that's a great thing to do with it. As far as a system symbol is concerned, it requires more work, but at the very least, we could have that. Do people understand this operation? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Seems like an interesting operation to me. I mean, it's like what happens in a database where you say index by this. Somebody's typing is very audible. Okay. Also, Ethan is raising the question of transpose with, what does this do, in fact, right now? Yeah, the transpose of a list and an association. What have we concluded about that?
I mean, it still needs to, we should support it with allowed heads, but the implementation is not done. And I mean, this particular case, you might be able to to use allowed heads goes to all, I think, to make it work. But this is a very simple case, and I mean the reason the reason it's not documented yet is that there are lots of cases that don't work. So
okay. There's one more thing on our live stream here. I'll just look for that, and then we should probably wrap up here. I'm particularly happy with the progress here on how to think about options for the function repository. That's good. Okay, so a few items from this. This notebook actually is being saved in a really random place, and I'm just going to send it to Sushma here.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. This might be our last live stream. I don't know whether it's our last live stream. Let me look. Of the season.
Stephen, can I briefly share something before you run away?
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. Actually, there's another live stream tomorrow talking about finance documentation. Hold on one second. Yes, go ahead, Itai.
So this is sort of apropos of nothing, but well, I guess it's a little early Christmas present for you and other Mac users that I've spent way too much time over the last week doing. So I have Mathematica old here and Mathematica new here, which started life as the same layout, and Mathematica old is being a little bit slow, but oh no, yes, and there we go. And we get the scary message saying that Mathematica old is not optimized for your Mac and needs to be updated because it still has a few.
I'm just amazed that having come out in Hebrew works at all.
Yes. So then Mathematica new is the same thing, but has a couple of, well, basically it has one updated binary, which was
the XML thing.
XML, and so the pull request was just approved this morning, and so it'll be in tonight's.
That's nice.
Opens with no scary warning.
Very nice. So. The warning is even scarier when it has fonts I can't read.
Yep. All right, so that's my Christmas present to all those Mac users out there.
Yeah, that's very good. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, great. All right, so thanks all. Thanks to folks on the live stream. Talk to you all soon.
Okay.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.